Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, welcome back to another video. Again, apologies for the mix up with the England squad announcement video that I did the other day. The sound wasn't great, so I've reverted to my iPhone mic. Hopefully it stands the test of time for this video, where I sort of look at the different settings on the microphone to try and make sure it's perfect for you, because I don't want to go through the exact same issue that I went through with that one, so apologies for that. Today's a little bit of a retrospective on Newcastle's season, a look back at what was good, what was bad, handing out my awards. I've got 4 awards to hand out, then I'll give you a summary of my thoughts of the season at the end and a rating out of 10 for how I think Newcastle have done this year, all things considered. So player of the season for me has to be Anthony Gordon. Alexander Isak has been superb, he's been amazing, he's been fantastic, obviously because he scored 25 goals. It's the first time since Alan Shearer that someone scored that amount of goals in a season, 21 in the Premier League. He deserves to be mentioned because of his incredible goals to game ratio. I think he was the best in the Premier League by the end. Given that he had so many injuries and it was a recurring groin problem, and he managed to put that behind him and find his best form. And he's never really been out of form when he's been in the Newcastle team, when he's been fit and firing since he joined from Real Sociedad in the summer of 2022. Isak has been fantastic, but my decision is Anthony Gordon. I'll tell you why it's Anthony Gordon. I think he is the heartbeat of Newcastle in an attacking sense. You've got Bruno Guimaraes in the midfield, you've got Isak up front, but the man who makes the difference and takes Newcastle to a new level in transition, running with the ball, running at players, has been Anthony Gordon. First player since Rule Fox in 1995 to score and assist double figures in the Premier League as well. And when you consider how much he struggled when he first arrived at the club in January of 2023, the first 6 months, how difficult he found it to adjust to Eddie Howe's way of working. There's obviously that incident at Brentford, which didn't help the whole dynamic, and fans were, on the fence about him. Newcastle paid 45 million for him anyway. There was all this sort of talk about his attitude, and then he went away with England under 21s last summer and won player of the tournament. England won the tournament, and he came back a completely different player. And he has been phenomenal all season. He's been available for the majority of the games as well. A bit like Bruno as well, another player who probably deserves a mention. But Gordon, for me, has been the most improved player and the player that's made the biggest difference in terms of the way Newcastle have played. He's dragged Newcastle through games. He's taken a leadership role. And yes, you could probably make this case for Bruno and Isak as well. But for me, the way that Gordon has improved, and speaking to people around him, speaking to people who know him, and the idea that his attitude has been questioned, and the idea that people weren't 100% sure on him when he first arrived, I think that transition to being this vitally important player has proven everybody right, because he was right at the top of the list in January 2022 as the key target back then. They made a bid for him in this previous summer as well, so he was a long-term target. Everyone knew that he would thrive under Eddie Howe, and I think everybody's been fully justified against the backdrop of a little bit of negativity. He is the most improved. I think because he's shown exactly what everyone thought of him and proven why he deserves that spot. So for me, Anthony Gordon gets the player of the season, just above Isak and Bruno. But as I've said so many times on this channel, as people will be aware, the three of them are neck and neck really for their importance to the team. Next is the game of the season. I think this one is much more obvious, much more clear cut than the last one. There's no real debate with this, and I think that's PSG at home. When you consider the atmosphere around that game, the magnitude of it, the first Champions League home game for 20 years, the way that Newcastle were expected to attack the Champions League at that point, there was a little bit of trepidation as to see where they would be, and they blew PSG away completely. I was at that game. The atmosphere was incredible. I remember being so taken aback on the review video that I did, the pre-match press conference as well from St James's Park, the video I did on there. It was sort of really interesting to hear Luis Enrique, the manager, and Lucas Hernandez, the PSG defender, talking about the atmosphere and talking about being ready for everything that was coming their way. But then tactically, they got it completely wrong. They went with 4 strikers up front, 2 men in midfield. It played into Newcastle's hands, and Newcastle made the most of it and absolutely blitzed PSG, as I say. What an occasion that was. It was a great way to introduce Newcastle back into the Champions League sphere, put themselves back on the European map, and I think it reminded everybody of how how special Newcastle United are as a club, how special those Champions League nights were at St James's Park. That one, obviously, it didn't quite go to plan against Dortmund and Milan with defeats in those games, but at that point, anything's felt possible. And for me, the way that Newcastle, there was a nervous energy in the air, which has been really sort of a cornerstone of the Eddie Howe era. I think when there's that nervous energy pre-game, Newcastle tend to have that intensity, find that sort of their mojo, and they did from the off that day. Almiron's goal early on, and Burn, then Longstaff, and then Fabian Schär as well. Absolutely perfect way to round off. What a fantastic day that was. And I think for me, that was the absolute zenith of this season. It didn't get better than that. What a fantastic evening it was. So that one, PSG at home, 4-1, back in October, is my game of the season. I won't surprise too many people to know that my goal of the season is Fabian Schär's 4th goal in that game. I think I won't go back into the detail of why I think that game was special. I've just mentioned that, but the goal from outside the box, he was slipping over as well, which I think actually helped it take it away from Gianluigi Donnarumma. Yes, the goals for Burn and Longstaff will get maybe more headlines because of the locality of those guys, the fact that they're born and bred Newcastle fans. Burn particularly has spoken about being in the crowd for the last Champions League campaign. But I think Schär really stole the show at the end with that fantastic goal. It rounded off the evening perfectly. And to be honest, I looked through, there's been over 100 goals scored for Newcastle this season in all competitions. It's been their most prolific goal-scoring season ever, which is quite impressive when you consider the Kevin Keegan years and the Sir Bobby Robson years when goal-scoring and attacking was their thing then. That's where they got their reputation for this sort of thing from. And it's been even better this season. But most of the goals haven't actually been aesthetically that impressive, really. I mean, there's plenty of really good build-up play and good finishes, but not many particularly stunning goals like last season. I think there was plenty of different options for me to choose from. The other option I had, mainly for the occasion and what it meant for the game, obviously Harvey Barnes' winner against West Ham from outside the area was absolutely superb. But again, because the PSG game was so special, because that atmosphere and that occasion was amazing, I think Schär rounding it off and just the noise that met it. It was just an evening of stunning moments, and that topped it off in perfect fashion. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. But for me, there's not actually that many rivals on an aesthetic level to Schär against PSG. Worst moment of the season, I think for me, there's quite a lot of umming and ahhing because there's been quite a few. I think you've Trippier's mistake at Chelsea, which robbed them of the progression to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup in December. You think of December as a whole with so many injuries and so many problems mounting up and sort of coming to a head in that game. The Everton game, the Spurs game, Liverpool at the end of that month as well. Forest. I think Forest really is the sort of lowest ebb of the season. I think in terms of emotionally, you could look at Tino Livramento's penalty decision at PSG, which was crazy. I was in the ground there that day, and it was very strange that the people around me in the press box were almost baying for the decision. It felt like the referee, who's one of the most experienced referees in Europe and had a fantastic game, and actually it felt like he was playing off the crowd when he gave that decision. You've got Liverpool at home, which is obviously a real sting in the tail, given that they had taken the lead in that game and Virgil van Dijk had been sent off. And then in the last 10 minutes, they capitulated like they did. Darwin Núñez comes off the bench and scores 2 late goals for Liverpool to turn that game on its head. That was emotionally very, very difficult to get over. So there were plenty more emotional moments, emotionally negative moments, I think, for Newcastle than the one I've picked. But I think I've gone for Forest at home because that felt like everything was really getting away from Newcastle at that stage. It was like, this season is really going south and something needs to be done. It was followed up by games against Bournemouth and Luton, which were particularly sort of bitty and erratic in the same way. But the fact that they were 1-0 up in that game, coasting, it didn't really feel like it felt like complacency had set in as well, considering Isak had scored a penalty at the start of that game on Boxing Day. Chris Wood equalised just before half-time and then scored 2 more in the second half to complete his hat-trick. It was absolutely astonishing how that game got away from Newcastle. It's the only game outside of the top 6 clubs that Newcastle have lost at home this season in the league. And it stands to me as one of those awful, awful moments and memories of the real, it felt like, as I say, the lowest ebb in a difficult season when injuries were piling up. The mentality, the tactics, everything about the team was not quite clicking. It took Newcastle a long time to recover from that game. I think the shock factor, I think, which was a positive sign in the PSG in the earlier award for PSG was really a negative here. So I've gone for Newcastle United's 3-1 defeat to Nottingham Forest at St James's Park on Boxing Day as my lowest point of the season. Again, let me know if you agree in the comments. And finally, I think I'll just wrap up by giving it a summary of the season. The problem with this season has been that the lack of ability to gain momentum and build momentum up into anything. Last season, it was all about momentum. They rode the crest of a wave all the way to the top four against many expectations. This year, I don't think expectations were any higher. I don't think people expected Newcastle to qualify for the Champions League again. But because of the injuries, because of Sandro Tonali's ban, which I haven't previously mentioned as a low ebb, which is another possible option as well, because of the fatigue, Newcastle never seemed to find their sort of mojo until maybe a point in the spring when they sort of rescued what was looking like turning into a mid-table season into a top 7 campaign and possibly European football, provided that Manchester City win the FA Cup at the weekend. I'm recording this on Thursday lunchtime, so I don't know the result of that. You probably do when you're watching this, but at the moment Newcastle are waiting. They're in Australia now. They're waiting to hear whether they'll be in Europe next season. I think that doesn't really impact the rating I can give Newcastle for their season, because they've done effectively what they needed to do to get there. Whether they and now it's out of their hands. So I think it's been, all things considered, given the things that Eddie Howe's had to deal with and the players have had to deal with the injuries, there's been an amazing amount of injuries this season. They've never really been able to gain that momentum. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It could have been better. There've been obviously a lot of low moments, but there've been some really good highs as well. Next season, hopefully, will be a little bit easier. There'll be more things coming in terms of transfers, and a lot more. Everything can calm down a bit. They can restart. I think that's what they need. Thank you very much for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is what you like. I'm going to do a channel update, setting my plans out for over the summer and next season later this week. So do keep an eye on that. Thank you very much for all your support in my first season on YouTube. I've really enjoyed it. I think my growth has been good. I think I've developed a lot better as the seasons go on. Let me know if you have any feedback for me in the comments as well. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.